Hello everyone. So I've just read chapter 9 of Coruscant Night Street of Shadows. We pick up with Captain Typho. And he's in the Jedi Temple and he's searching the archives, but he's not really finding anything. The archives have been very much looted. There's not really anything left there, and what is left is all kind of messed up, etc. He's not really finding any information on Anakin. Um, and he just starts wondering if it's worth it, and then he sees Padme in his mind, so and he says that yes, it is worth it, and he'll be willing to sacrifice his life for her to revenge Padme. Um, and it says he knew what his next step had to be. The next question that had to be answered: had Anakin Skywalker, who had been the last person to see Padme alive and thus topped his suspects list, really died on Mustafar, or had he somehow escaped? And this bit confuses me a bit because wasn't he already searching to see if Anakin was alive, or to try and find Anakin, or in yeah, it's bit confuses me a little. That bit confused me a little bit. But anyway. Um, then he hears footsteps, and so he hides. Um, and it's Aura Singh, and she's in the archives. And Typho realizes that he can't really get out of there because the amount of debris and rubble, she'll hear him. And we're told that he had heard of her past and her reputation. Um, and he tries to throw a dart stick and hoping it's some explosion. Um, hoping that sorry, hoping that when it lands it'll have a little blast of light and a big sound. It'll distract Sora. But before he can do anything, before he can even throw it, as he's preparing to throw it, Aura Singh all of a sudden has turned and drawn her lightsaber on Typho. So the lightsaber still seems to be working, unless it's another one. But I think it would clarify if it was another one. Um, and she asks who sent him, and Typho explains that he's here of his own accord, he hasn't been sent by anyone, and of course Singh is having a hard time believing him. So Typho squeezes the data stick in his hands, and it blows, it blinds, and he closes his eyes. It blinds Aura. Of course, there's a deafening sound, and so he kicks his foot up, and it disarms Aura of her lightsaber. She takes his lightsaber, and we're told and he ignites it, and we're told that he's had some experiences with lightsabers, having had some experience with Qui-Gon Jinn and Mace Windu, but he's only had like a few hours of experience. Um, and here he's facing a master of the art, and Aurra Singh takes another lightsaber from her belt, a green one, and he's able to block the first two strikes, and he thinks, "Oh, this is lucky, but it's not going to be lucky enough to keep blocking." And eventually, he's driven up to a column, and Singh is about to strike down and explain. But before she does, she brings up that if he knows anything on Jack Sparrow to speak now, and he will spare him a few seconds. No, and then she goes to strike down. And Typho knows there's only one chance he has of surviving, which is to do a surprise attack. So he thrusts forward above his head. Aurra Singh does the easiest move, which is ducking, and that's when Typho makes a swing and drops to the ground, either unconscious as he's hit the antenna of a biocomputer thing, which of course has sent like an electrical shock through her. It's an implant, so that was hurt. and then she's on the ground unconscious. And Typho, and then she starts twitching, and Typho wonders if she's trying to lure him closer to get him. And he knows the most logistical thing to do would be to kill her there and then, so she's not a problem anymore. But he remembers what his uncle Panaka said, which is, if you have the opportunity to show mercy, then do so. Otherwise, you'll become the monsters that they're fighting against. So he doesn't, and he starts to wonder if he's really any different from Aura Singh. You know, she's she's hunting, she hunts, and he's hunting down Anakin. She does it. She's doing it for the money. He's doing it for the revenge. Um, but he realizes he's not in the state of mind to talk about that, to make a judgment of me. Um, and so Typho leaves Aura the same way that they met, which was completely out of ignorance and accident. Um, and that's where we end the chapter. Um, First off, the fact that we just cut to Typho in the temple. you know, I find that really funny because there was, especially in Master of the Jedi Underworld, you know, there was a big point made out of even in Master of the Jedi not Master Deception Reckoning, in that book, because both of them feature going into the temple. You know, it was a big struggle to get into the temple. There had to be very thorough planning, and here we just completely skip that step and just see Typho in the temple. So it was a bit. Oh, I thought we would have seen Typho figuring out how to get into the temple and getting in there before we get jumped straight to him in the archives. But no, no, he's just it's just you know, just gets in there. I was thinking about it now. I think yes, Typho was trying to find where Anakin is, but of course the rumor was that he had been killed. Um, and maybe it was trying to find his grave or something and do something to that. But now he's curious as to whether Anakin has actually survived or survived. So maybe that's what it was. It wasn't really properly explained. It was just a bit of a hmm? Um, Again, it's not really a whole lot else to talk about with Typho's grief, because we've already kind of talked about that. You know, we've already talked about that. But I think a very good comparison was made between Aura and Typho. As, you know, Typho wonders is how he's any different from Aura, because he's trying to, you know, so it was a very good and a thought-provoking comparison. It definitely was. The fight, it it was actually quite impressive. I was expecting Typho to maybe die there and then, because I know he dies in this book. I know he does die in this book. But I wasn't expecting him to die this soon, and what relevance would he have had in the story then? Or if he doesn't connect back to Jackson somewhere, because again, whether we like it or not, he is the main character. You know, it's just how is that story, how is his storyline going to connect to that? And I will say one thing that has been really good with Coruscant Nights so far. So it has these storylines that feel very disconnected, and then and then it just all of a sudden somehow, pardon me, ties up into a nice bow. You know, the last book did that in a really good way. And I kept saying it, and I've said it quite a few times in that, you know, like my reviews of the previous book. I wonder how the book's gonna tie into each other. How it's gonna tie into itself. I mean, tie each plot line together. and it did it perfectly. It did it in a very perfect, nice spell, very quickly, but it did do it. Um, and so I assume there's going to be a similar thing that will happen here. Um, again, I have no clue how Typo's storyline will connect back to Jax. I think it may somehow connect back to Jax now that he knows that another Jedi is alive, and also now it's made clear that Vader still suspects Jax is probably alive. But you know, he probably suspects that maybe he'll go to Jax. He'll try and find Jax to see if he knows anything on Anakin. You know. Um, um, Again, the fight between Typho and Ola, he held himself quite well. You know, again, as I said, I was expecting him to die, but he didn't. And it was again quite impressive. You know, I was fully expecting him to lose the fight. You know, I knew if he didn't die, I thought he was going to lose it, but no, he actually somehow won it. He somehow won the fight, and I think that really was impressive. Again, he was struggling lots, you know, but he still somehow pulled through. The plus armor he had there. But yeah, it was a very impressive. It was very impressive, I think. But yeah, I don't have anything else to say in this chapter. So, thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello everyone, I've just read chapter 10 of Coruscant Night Street of Shadows, which means I'm a quarter of the way through the book, chapter-wise. Not a third, sorry. For some reason I always get them mixed up. So we pick back up with Dan and Namath, who are visiting the Cephalon. And the Cephalon, Dan asks, what does he ask? We have two sentients on the UML who need, and the Cephalon already knows what he's gonna say because he perceives time. And eventually it's just he keeps spitting out some cryptic stuff. And eventually he winds up saying extreme this vulnerability perceived in alternate probability, extreme discontinuity in false convergence, prioritize discrete vigilance and end fugitive recovery operation. And it completely confuses Den and Narath. And we are also told that in a study trying to understand Cephalons by the Empire, they had involved a Force-sensitive Inquisitor who had gone mad from the study. So, anyway, Den and Narath have no idea what the Cephalons trying to warn them of, so they start making their way back, but they know that it's trying to warn them of something. Then we cut over to Jax, Sci-Fi, and Deidre, who are now in a bar in the Southern Underground, and they're discussing, of course, Bessie's death and they start basically their investigation, and I5 pretty much brings up that given the Kamasi are I can't specifically remember all the specific details, but basically the place he was stabbed in would require a lot of muscle to actually puncture. And they can rule out Deidre as a suspect because she just doesn't have, her species just doesn't have the necessary muscle to do so. And it's also brought up about the locator rings. And it turns out I5's been able to take off his locator bolts, whatever it was, and he destroys it. And Jax wonders if what his father starts wondering what his father would have thought about his choices, and Jax and I-5 assures him that he thinks he probably would have been very proud of Jax and respected his decisions. And they have a very sweet conversation. And then we cut back over to Aura Singh, who thinks that she wakes up and she, in her head, of course, compliments Typho's skill, and thinks he's going to be a worthwhile hunt until, but she has, of course, has to finish hunting Jax first. And then we cut back over to the Jackson Company's little apartment, and they're discussing the force convergence that Cephalon have brought up, and they can't figure out what it's on about. And Zane's completely hilarious. Though it is like it's always been the comic relief. He and I-5 are always the comic relief, and they have great banter, of course. And then Mahinian walks in and explains he couldn't find any lightsaber components nor lightsaber crystals, and he assumes that's a wrap. And then on the investigation, and then almost autonomously on his own, it's described that sometimes it feels like his tongue has a mind of its own, like a Cephalon. And he brings up about how he could do some digging himself, see if he could find any lightsaber components. And Jax says, all right, okay, but you have to focus on finding Valet's killer first. That's the most important thing. And then we cut over to Deja, Jax, and I-5, who are now watching a game at a stadium. And Deja's explaining, of course, she's explaining what some of her Vess's operations have been about, how they had only moved to Coruscant 2 months ago, and they were very isolated. They didn't really have much opportunity to be social, and she explains that they did let one of the individuals I'm gonna just look at it now. And she says, so you see, we were rather quite isolated, except for Baron Umber, which they saw quite frequently. And she explains that he abhors quite a lot of Bess's art. And she explains that he's a Vindelian. He's a Vindelian. And they're quite secretive and don't really look at news, so he probably will be shocked and quite massively hurt by Bess's death, if the police haven't already talked about him, haven't already informed him. And then Jax and I-5 suggests that Polhouse is a very good, from the impression he gets, he's a very good investigator, and you'll probably want to finish up this investigation fast and move right on to the next one, because they don't really want any attention, because even he can succumb to political pressure, etc., and they don't really want much attention on a Kamasi murder case right after the destruction of the Holocaust of Kamas, and Palpatine wouldn't want that attention if he is responsible. And she basically, and Deidre is basically takes the impression of, okay, so you want me to leave Coruscant and basically leave the investigation, and I-5 pretty much confirms that that's exactly what he's suggesting, what Drax is suggesting, and there will definitely be a safer way of getting her out. And Deidre, she considers it for a moment, and then she says that no, Vess wouldn't have done that, so she'll stay. She has to at least attempt to find who murdered him. And Jax says that he admires her determination, if not the decision. And I-5 basically gives Umber's address. Jax says, of course, they're going to go and find Umber and discuss about art. And then I5 gives Umber's address, and teacher is completely confused about how he knows where his private home is because it's unlisted, and I5 just taps his head and goes connections. And that's where we end the chapters. This was a longer chapter, it's again 20 pages. I do like that now we're kind of a bit of ahead, you know. Before we were kind of we were like 10 pages behind the actual chapter count. So like if say we were on chapter 8, we would be on page 90. Now we're at page 120, and we're on chapter 11 next time. So I like that we're about 10 pages ahead now. I just hope that we keep staying ahead. Now, was there anything I missed? Because I did kind of go zoom, because I did kind of just zoom through that. Surrounding Ivan Jax's conversation, yeah, my five says I think he would have been Lord Pavan would have been quite proud of him. And Jax says he thought he hated the Jedi. I5 says he did, but only because they took you from him. He wouldn't have hated you for becoming one. I think he would have approved of the choices you've made, most of them anyway, especially your decision to stay and aid the Whiplash. Lorne admires courage, particularly the courage to stand up for one's convictions, and Jackson explains that he almost went before Nick gave him the mission from Peel. And I5 asks, so, and you complete the mission to the best of your ability, so why do you stay? And Jax says it will never be finished. Defeat the Emperor and Vader and liberate the galaxy. The idea defines craziness. We should get out now while there's still a transport berth with my name on it. I believe Den would agree with you, the droid replied. Vociferously. No doubt, Jax sighed. And yet, you can't. You know me so well. And I5 explains that he knows humans so well. And he says, that's why it doesn't surprise me at all that you remain here to continue the fight for what you insist is a lost cause. If presented with that choice, I knew from the day I met you which one you would make. Is that so? Jax looks around him. And he asks what choice is that, and I5 says the right one. And they've all also to determine what the murder weapon must have been from I5's for Valette, from I5's ability to slice into communications. And it's a real rather primitive weapon, not a vibrating weapon, and was also between a very small weapon, so like, you know, a normal knife, or of some sort that could have been easily concealed. But yeah, let's you know, can't go over everything. I mean, Jane in this chapter, he was comedy gold in this chapter. You Jen and I5 are like the comedy royalty in this in this book series. You know, they're just so funny. You can't beat them. And this chapter had no shortage of Den hilarity. He was so funny in this chapter. The amount of the funny remarks he gave him. Michael Reeves does such a good job with writing Den. You know, I know he created Den, and I know that again, well, I think he did. But he just does such a good job of because he's only been in Michael Reeves books, but anyway, you know, he just does such a good job of writing Den, and Den's just so funny. He's so funny. You just can't beat him. You just can't beat him in I5 when it comes to humour. At least in these books, anyway. I still think Keats. I think it's always going to be kind of topping my comedy list. At least with Star Wars, you know, he has such good humour, and that's the Jedi. It's a shame we didn't appear more in those books, but Anyway, back to Coruscant Knights. The Cephalons are definitely interesting. Do they kind of warrant a chapter that basically explained to us what a Cephalon was? That whole section of a chapter that dedicated to just telling us what a Cephalon was? I don't really think so. I think they are interesting, but we could have just had a very condensed explanation as to what they are. That really had to be explained was that they had several limbs that basically are minds of their own that was completely separate from each other. That's basically all you needed to know. I don't really think a whole chapter surrounding, and also that they perceive time the way we perceive space, and they perceive space the way we perceive time. That's really all you need to know on them. And it was expanded on for about 3-4 pages in the book a couple chapters back. But I think they definitely are interesting. They definitely are interesting, but I think maybe we spent a little bit too much time on the Cephalons, but again, that was a couple chapters ago. And I do think it was definitely very hard to follow what they were talking about, and it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So they did a good job of. So I think Michael Reeves did a really good job of making them feel like they exist in the fourth dimension. That they're four-dimensional beings. I think he did a really good job of them doing that. It's great that we can't start in the investigation now, and we're kind of getting finally a bit of a private investigator thing to Jax, but even though he's kind of doing it of his own accord, so technically not really not very private investigatory. I don't really know why we needed that horror bit and that horror scene bit in this chapter. I think it could have just been saved for another chapter. That kind of focuses more on horror. I don't really think we needed a chapter specifically. I don't really think we needed that bit specifically for horror. Hold on. Sorry about that. The lightsaber components. It's disappointing that Rahinian couldn't find any, but I do know Jax gets a lightsaber. I mean, it's literally on the cover of the next book. It's literally on the cover of the next book that he gets the lightsaber. Because I've been editing Wikipedia, expanding, creating all the new articles for Jax's weaponry and arsenal. I've also been expanding the equipment section of his article, and I have seen that he gets Oracing's lightsaber from Typho. So I know he gets a lightsaber, and it just kind of make me wonder, okay, so what's the point of then looking for lightsaber components? So yeah. Again, it's nice that we're kind of getting a bit of a murder mystery here. I like crime shows. Again, I do quite like watching crime shows. Not there's I like some I don't quite like as much. One of the ones I really have liked is High Potential. And there was a movie that I saw. I think I brought it up in the last review. Either earlier this year or late last year, about a course called Thursday Murder Club, based on books. And that's why I kind of started reading Coruscant Knights. That's why I started reading it in the first place, so I could actually get to the Thursday Murder Club books. I am really enjoying Coruscant Knights. I am really enjoying it. And it's nice that we're kind of getting a murder mystery story in the lead up to a Thursday Murder Club for me. So, at least I'm getting that hit of a murder mystery. And, you can understand Deidre's reasoning for staying back on Coruscant. It's not just about, honouring what her partner would have done. I think it also is just a bit of, she needs that closure. She needs to know who killed the love of her life. It's brought up that they probably weren't romantic, but I think there was certainly a sense of romance there, especially with how grief-stricken she is, and you just see how hurt she is by everything, and I think you can really tell that she just wants that closure, and that she again, he just needs to know who killed her partner to properly be at peace. I do get the feeling that it might be Barra number, but also there's probably other individuals that we're going to be introduced to that probably has, you know, that were probably connected, that could be connected to the murder. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a murder mystery. Because they've already been able to clear Deidre. We know it's not any of the main characters. Well, maybe Bohemian hired someone, but I doubt it. But yeah. Now, a little bit off topic. Yesterday, Tim Curry passed away, or at least the time I'm recording this. Yesterday, Tim Curry passed away. The day before that, Dolly Parton passed away. So I'll just rest in peace to them both. They were incredible people. They were lovely. So may they rest in peace. You may have seen my community post yesterday where I made a community post saying that I rewatched Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it's been a couple months since I last watched it. I think I last watched it in June. It's August now, so it's been a few months. So I went and rewatched that yesterday, about an hour after my mother told me, Tim Curry passed away, went and rewatched it, and I also watched it with a Useful Duncan fan. So, and it was his first time watching it, he told me it was good. But yeah, and I also went and listened back to Jolene yesterday as well from Dolly Parton. Parton, sorry, not Parton, Parton. So yeah, very sad. Hopefully another one doesn't go today. Yeah, someone hopes that. Oh, I hope it's not. Hope it's not the first of three when Dolly Parton went. Of course, we had Tim Curry yesterday. So hopefully not another person goes today. Hopefully. So yeah. I think that'll bring an end to this review. I enjoy the chapter. Again, I think I'm getting used to the longer chapters now. You know, I've had about 3 of them. That's about 60 pages worth. So yeah, I'm starting to get used to them, because the first chapter 6, it really was a chapter 7, it was a bit of an but not as bad, and now it's still not quite as bad. It's not quite as bad, you know, still a bit of a still a bit of a struggle, but you know, it wasn't quite as bad. It wasn't quite as bad. So yeah. Anyway, still exhausting. Don't get me wrong. It is still an exhausting length, but yeah, I'm enjoying it. I enjoyed it definitely a lot more than chapter 6, and I think it is just because it's getting used to the length again. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and goodbye.